What is a warrior? A warrior is defined in many ways. A fighter, a leader, a hero. Someone who has courage, strength, power, and resilience to whatever faces them. Whether a player, coach, manager, broadcaster, custodian, or administrator, anyone involved with sports is needed to achieve the highest level of excellence. It takes a warrior to achieve excellence, but it takes a village of warriors to achieve greatness. This is the Warriors Beyond the Scoreboard podcast.
Hello, my name is Garrett Lash. I'm a Wawasee Digital Audio Video Media Pathways CTE student of Mr. Van Loo's class. This is a podcast featuring Wawasee High School coaches, players, administrators, and also featuring all of the different athletic programs. Today we are going to sit down and talk with Principal Mr. Geoff Walmer and Assistant Principal Mr. John Snyder and the Dean of Students, Mr. Steve Perek. Welcome to the studio, gentlemen.
Thanks, Garrett.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So you guys are all leaders of this high school. You're principals. You work in the office every day. And so we'll get into that. But first, starting with Mr. Walmer, tell a little bit about your story, your family, where you're from,
Sure.
then we'll get started.
Sure. I grew up right here in Kosciuszko County. Spent my entire life here. Went to Grace College as well. Began my teaching career right here at Wawasee High School and taught math here for 5 years before jumping into administration. Worked my way around before I was able to come back to Wawasee High School as principal, and this is now year 6 that I'm finalizing as principal here.
Nice. What about you, Mr. Perek?
Well, I'm not from Indiana. I kind of grew up kind of all over the place. Ohio, Alaska, Texas. Ended up at Grace College just like Mr. Walmer did, maybe a couple of years before he was there.
Times 10.
Well, like I said, a little bit before you were there. After that, I got my first full-time teaching job at Wawasee Middle School. I taught there for 9 years. I was lucky enough to move over to the alternative school and gain some experience before I became Dean of Students at Wawasee High School. And that's been 20 years ago. So I've been in the office as the Dean of Students for about 20 years.
Thanks. Mr. Snyder?
Well, I grew up in Warsaw, and my teaching career actually is a second career for me, but I've been in education now for 37 years in some variety of position as a high school basketball coach, as a teacher, and as an administrator over all the years. Taught most of my time at Warsaw as a social studies teacher and a basketball coach there, and then went into administration, was an assistant principal at Warsaw, became the principal at Whitco High School. And when Mr. Walmer was hired here, Mr. Walmer was one of my former players. And so he asked me if I would consider coming to Wawasee to be an assistant principal, and I agreed to do that. And I've been here for 6 years with Mr. Walmer.
So you guys have all came from all different walks of life, and some of you are from around here and others are not. And so you guys like Wawasee? I mean, it's just, how did you find your way to Wawasee?
I'll start with that one. Garrett, I wanted nothing more than to teach where I grew up. I'm refusing to say the name. Mr. Snyder was he just let it out. I'm not going to use the name.
What, Warsaw?
I shouldn't swear on the podcast.
But I'll be honest, I just even out of college, that's where I wanted to be. Well, I'd heard about a teaching opening up here. Mr. Phillips was here at the time, and there's a couple basketball and baseball positions, assistant coach positions open. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just apply. Came up here, I interviewed. I didn't really want this job necessarily. Left that day. And I had a good feeling when I left. It seemed like good people. And within a couple hours, I had a phone call offering me the job and telling me I had 24 hours to decide. I knew the other school was going to have an opening, but I didn't know when. And so after a lot of thought and prayer, I decided I would go ahead and take this position, and I fell in love with Wawasee immediately. As soon as I got up here and got started, this became home immediately, and I had no thoughts or at that point desires to ever go to the other place. So yeah, that was my story. I was not wanting to be here necessarily, but other plans were in place, and once I got here, I fell in love with it.
And I would say, I grew up, Wawasee was the rival, and not that as an adult that's a big deal, but it was just something I never really thought about ending up at Wawasee. But like again, Mr. Walmer called and talked to me about coming here. We had a home on Lake Webster, and just everything kind of fell into place. And I'm really super thankful that it did. Wawasee is an awesome community. I'm glad to call it home now. And, it's been a great 6 years to be part of Warrior Nation.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have any idea what I was getting into because I did not grow up around here. So I didn't even know there was a rivalry between those two schools. But like I said, I started teaching here and I taught with some really, really good people and really just kind of enjoyed the leadership. I enjoyed the camaraderie that I had with the colleagues. Middle school's a different beast than high school, but at the same time, that was a really good experience that I had, and just decided at some point that I wanted to do something a little bit different, but still in the school realm, and this kind of opened up at the right time, and it worked out for me.
Yeah. So you guys sound like, you enjoy your job and enjoy what you do, and the way you found yourself here is, like we said, we all come from different walks of life and different experiences and how we got here. And that's what's so interesting. And also about this podcast, it gives people opportunity to hear from you guys. And, they see you all the time at sporting events, maybe, and other events, but maybe, we don't know the backstory of the principal or assistant principal or what have you. So it gives a good insight of what happened and now where you guys are now. Let's go to your job a little bit. What are some challenges that you face? But let's start talking about your job, and then we'll get into some of that stuff.
Okay. I want to go back real quick because the challenges that I face as principal, I've got these two guys that I'm going to all the time saying, all right, I got the situation. I need, let me bounce something off of you. Give me your thoughts on this. And when I became principal here, I had an established relationship with Mr. Perek from when I taught here, and he was the assistant principal handling the dean or the discipline and attendance. And so I learned from him also as I was taking my classes to become an administrator. So Mr. Perek was always somebody that I'd kind of looked up to in that way. And when I was offered this position as principal, the assistant principal position was also open. I think I was 35 or so at the time that I was walking in as principal, and I had a mentor early on that told me about when they had accepted a position in leadership, what was really important for them was to surround themselves with maybe some older, wiser people that have around them, so that when you're kind of the younger guy, you've got someone there reeling you in that's mentoring you as your assistant. So when the first person I said I wanted to reach out to was Mr. Snyder, because as he shared earlier, he's a former basketball coach of mine, someone I've always looked up to. We got to work together for a year and a half while at that other place. And so I knew the kind of guy, I knew who he was. I knew where his heart was. I knew that he's a culture guy. And I knew that the first step in what we need to do, what my desire was to create a high school culture that fit my personality, and I knew Mr. Snyder's values and character was right in line with what I desired to see in a school, and I already knew Mr. Perek with where he was. And so for me, the first step was that. So now when I face these challenges at school that a principal would deal with, I've got a guy who's been a principal himself, who's dealt with the exact same things I'm dealing with at times, and he is a perfect a partner to brainstorm stuff with. I have an assistant principal who's handled discipline and attendance for 20 years, who's been through the ringer, who's trained other administrators. And so when I've got a situation in that way, I can go to him. And so as far as the challenges, it's really, I will say our challenges are often times when, kids are kids and teenagers are teenagers, right? And we love them to death, but they still sometimes make choices that don't represent themselves the best they can. It doesn't represent their families the way that they probably would desire to represent. And it certainly doesn't represent us or our values and who we want to be as a school. And so working through those situations where we're dealing with patrons within the community or other parents who are saying, well, this is how Wawasee High School is, or this is what happened at Wawasee High School. Well, okay, that might be an isolated incident, and we do need to address that. It needs to be handled. But that's not who we are, and that's not the fabric of who we're trying to create ourselves to be. And so navigating those conversations is one of the greatest challenges, because to me, the most important thing is our community understands the values that our administrators and teachers are trying to instill in our students.
Yeah. You guys have been in administration for a while, and a question for you is, over the time, do you think student behavior has changed? I mean, are we seeing a behavior change? I don't know. I talked to a lot of teachers, and we're seeing a little change, but I don't know.
Well, speaking as an old guy here who's been in education for a long time, I'm always a little leery of the phrase "kids are different today." Are some behaviors different than they were 20 years ago? Absolutely.
Right.
But that's often and most often evidence of the environment that they've grown up with. And we are still seeing the effects of students who were trying to be students during COVID. And
oh, yeah.
And not that we ever use that as an excuse anymore, but the fact of the matter is that's had a significant impact on families and how they view education. It's had impact on how sometimes they view working through difficult situations. That's kind of one of the things I've seen the most of. I think probably electronic use has a big deal of that.
Yeah.
But in terms of what's at the very heart of a young person, that's no different. They want to do the right thing. They will listen to good leadership. So those basic fundamental human things have remained consistent really probably throughout time.
Right.
But there are some changes that come with time. If you'd ask an older person 20 years ago, what are kids like today? They would have said, well, back in, 20 years ago, so things change. So we as educators have to constantly adapt to what is happening with our students.
I mean, I agree with all that. I mean, there's just every class we get kind of has its own culture that comes to us. Every child that comes to us comes from a home that, we don't have the background. We just deal with them as they come, no matter what their background is, no matter what happened this morning, no matter what happened last week. And again, we care about all the kids, and it's just one of those things where, there are times when students do things that they need to be corrected. I think we all see each other and talk about these things fairly regularly. Just, these are situations that we're dealing with. Maybe it's a little bit different than it was last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. But the basic point is, they're good people. They want to do the right thing. They want to be successful. And sometimes they don't even know how to be successful. So we look at it more as parents guiding. We're parents at school. We see them for 7-8 hours a day at the very least most of the time. So we see them for a large chunk of the day. And we see ourselves just as kind of those figures that get to guide them, find out what their passions are, find out what they're really important to them, and try to get them plugged in, whether it be athletics, whether it be, the arts, whether it be something, whatever is interesting to them. What's their motivator? What's their passion? Help identify it, help plug them into where that's going to make them grow the most, and sit back and watch them blossom. It's kind of how our philosophy is.
So I don't know about you guys, but I think some of the damage is to a student is they come to school for 8 hours and then they go home, and then that's their life. I think if more students got involved with sports and other things, we would see, hey, that kid has really grown, has kind of come out of his shell since he's part of basketball or football. And it saddens me to see kids go home and, they don't do anything else. They don't have an outside world. And I don't know.
Well, and there's all kinds of research out there that would agree exactly with what you said, that as students get plugged into extracurricular activities, whatever that is, and I would even include part-time jobs in that.
Oh yeah.
That's where students see this most significant growth. That's where kids grow up. They find, and I got to be careful using this term, but it kind of applies here. They find their tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And they find the people who share similar beliefs, they have similar goals, and that binds them together. And that's where we see the positive influence on each other that helps them grow. Yeah. And that is more organic and more powerful than anything that we could do.
Yeah. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. You know, we talked about some challenges in your jobs and some different things like that. So, Mr. Walmer, what is the mission statement here at Wawasee High School?
Well, as a school corporation, oh my gosh, I just said it to you guys 5 times in a row right before we started here. Is that our students are confident, well-rounded citizens who positively impact their communities.
Mm-hmm.
We said that at every board meeting, and that the last part, that positively impact their communities. That always is one that strikes me, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. So that's our Wawasee Community Schools,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, mission, vision, statement, whichever that is. But if you ask any kid or teacher here at Wawasee High School specifically, they probably aren't going to repeat that. But if you ask them what's the goal of Wawasee High School, I think all of them are going to tell you to become the #1 high school in the state of Indiana. That's something that they hear me say all the time, and it's something I want. That's the language I want used here. And so that would be, if you ask me for Wawasee High School specifically, is to become the #1 high school in the state of Indiana.
Yeah. Now that's a big goal. And I mean, you can get there if we keep working at it, and it'll take time, but we're going to get there, I think.
Well, and that's something I often, with teachers especially, is like, well, how do you know if you're the #1 high school? Like, what measures are you using to figure that out? And I'll tell you a couple things. One, our academic growth over the last several years has been commendable. And so the academic achievement is one that we want to be better than everyone around us. And so we're continuing to make strides and improvements there. Another is to be the most compassionate high school in the state, and a place where no matter who walks in our door, we love them, we support them no matter what. And kids are picking each other up, speaking positively to one another, remaining optimistic. And then I think the third, you actually hit on this a little bit ago, Garrett, is that all kids are involved. Mm-hmm. Everyone's involved.
Oh yeah.
If we have those two, especially the compassion and becoming involved, those, in addition to the hard work our teachers are putting in, focused effort, and their curriculum and the academic, the instructional side, those 3 elements will, what's the word I'm looking for? Push us into becoming that #1 high school.
Yeah, we're constantly looking to raise the bar, and I think that's the language that we use is becoming the #1 state or #1 school in the state of Indiana. Well, that can look, that's sometimes kind of grasping, but if we have certain measurements, but the filter for which we make all decisions as administrators, the hard work that our teachers put in, the ambition of our students to be the best versions of themselves. If our filters throughout our school community is to be the #1 high school in the state of Indiana, that's, like you said, it's going to push us, it's going to raise the bar. And whether we get to some title as #1 school in the state of Indiana, the real push is just to get better, constant improvement, and never settling for good enough.
Yeah.
Let me give an example. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. But,
that's fine. Yeah.
We're all sports guys sitting around here, so we all the way I like to describe it. Mary Hurley, who used to be athletic director here long ago, would always say that as a head coach or as coaches, our job was to build a program so that, every year at Wawasee, you're not getting 30 incredible athletes coming into your program year after year, where you just have these incredible athletes flooding through maybe the bigger schools of 2,000-4,000 students may have, just more likely. But what we want is a program that is consistent and successful, so that when that group of athletes comes through, they're ready for the success at the highest level. And so for me, what that says is what Mr. Snyder was alluding to is raising the bar, or I'd say raising the floor of when we have maybe a team that we know we don't quite have, the best athletes necessarily. We can still be competitive. We can still win some games. We may not win the sectional, but we may have a shot, and we may do pretty good during the regular season and feel like we accomplished more with this team than we would have if we didn't have that focused effort we put in as coaches. So I'll compare that with our SAT scores, for instance. In 2022, our overall SAT average was 37 points below the state average. Okay, 37 points below. In 2023, we made a substantial increase in our scores. The state actually decreased in scores, but we were still about 14 points below the state average. And then in 2024, last school year, we were 20 points above the state average. Okay, so in just 2 years, we made up a ton of ground. Now, we just received results recently for our most recent SAT that we just took, this current junior class. Mm-hmm. And if you track the overall data of this current junior class from back when they were in middle school to now, they have achieved overall at lower levels than what the previous couple of groups had. So we anticipated maybe not an increase in SAT scores, in which that came up. We did not score as high as we did last year in the SAT. But I want to point something out that I believe is incredibly important. In a potential year where maybe you don't have that team you expect to win the sectional or maybe have a chance at state, I still feel we had a really successful season with the team that we had for two reasons. One, in a down year, this year, our scores went down. We were still 4 points above the state average. Okay, compare that to just 3 years ago when we were 37 points below the state average. So now a down year is still above the state average. That's huge, right? Secondly, this junior class last year on the PSAT, they scored 21 points below the state average on the PSAT last year as sophomores. And now here, a year and a half later, they're scoring 4 points above the state average on the SAT. Just significant growth.
Yeah.
And so that just speaks to the intentionality and hard work that our teachers are putting in, the kids buying into it, students doing their part to drive us to becoming the number one high school in the state of Indiana. I mean, I still wish that we would have increased our SAT scores. Don't get me wrong. Like, the competitor in me says, all right, let's find the silver lining in this. Let's find the positive in it, but let's not be satisfied with that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I think that's kind of how we all should be. Like, let's find the good part, but let's not be all right with that. Let's keep going. And it's kind of like in sports, and you keep referring to that. We won a sectional this year. Like, let's pretend we did. Won a sectional. And it just kind of goes for any team. You win a sectional. Okay, that was good, but what next year can we do to get a little better every year? And that's what you do in the classroom. You get a little better every year, and hopefully good things turn out. So, all right, let's shift gears a little bit. We talked about the mission statement. We know the school year can get long, and we're coming down to, like, we got spring break next week, and then we'll have about 6 weeks until the end of the year. What are some things you tell the students or you do to kind of lighten the mood a little bit? Like, we can get through this, and it's not,
I talked a lot. Do you want to talk, Mr. Snyder?
Well, I don't know if, we try to have as much fun as we can, I guess, within the confines of a school day. We just came off Powwow, which was a big event, and a lot of people. That was in the middle of March. About 2-3 weeks ago now. But I think one of the things that we need to do as leaders, and we all do, is remain positive when our interactions with students, whether it's somebody who got in trouble and is going into Mr. Perek's office, to watch him work with students who are in a difficult situation, and he is able to remain positive with them, to just being out in the hallway, and saying good morning to kids, how you doing, and having those conversations. Because school, this time of year can be, like you said, tough to get. This is a long stretch to get to spring break. But I think one of our ways to do that is to kind of uplift the students. But one of the things we also do is we're very conscious of how the teachers are doing. We've had a couple. Mr. Walmer is very good about providing lunch for teachers, and we're constantly kind of checking to see how teachers are doing, because as they go, their classrooms go, and as their classrooms go, the students go. And so we can make it drudgery, we can make it along, or we can just keep plugging along and doing the right things and enjoy each other's companies. We can enjoy the process of getting better every day.
I think that all boils down to, again, who we are as people. As the leadership goes, so go your teachers, so go your classrooms. And if they see us being positive, encouraging them, encouraging students, that's going to also affect their classrooms. So if the leadership is positive and speaking encouragement instead of, looking like you just barely made it in today because you can't hardly bring yourself to come to work, that also would transfer. So instead of that, you'll see us here early in the morning. You'll see us going to ball games and being positive again. So it's the whole package. It's not just when we feel like it, right?
Yeah.
Which is another point to try to get across, right? Mm-hmm. Because not everybody in any job feels like I love to be here every single day. Mm-hmm. No student, no teacher, nobody in any job.
My parents say I do things that I don't want to do, but I do it anyways.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly,
something.
Right?
And
mm-hmm.
that's something we talk about in class. Sometimes, like today, I walked in and there was the weather forecast. The baseball game is off for tonight, and Van Loo emailed me the sports report. I went in the studio, recorded it. It was on the air in 10 minutes. I didn't plan for it, but that's just what happened. And so different things come up, and
that's the perseverance that we've talked about, right? Is getting through those things that you don't like to experience the things that you do like. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you do as a job. It doesn't matter, where you're going in life. There's always going to be things that are a struggle. But it's always having your eyes on the prize in terms of, because I do this, I also get to do this. And if we can instill that in our students here at Wawasee, then I consider that to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you guys, said it great. You always want to look to be successful, and what can we do to get there? And that's always a great vision to have. So let's kind of shift gears to sports a little bit. You guys talked about you were a basketball coach, and Mr. Walmer played under you, and you did some sports too, Mr. Perek?
I did some wrestling and some football.
Wrestling and football. Okay. Nice.
Not quite basketball.
Not quite basketball.
But he can shoot a three, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
This Friday morning game is on par sometimes.
Yeah, I get that once a year.
So when it comes to sporting events, what are some things you guys do as administrators? Do you come to sporting events? Do you oversee certain things? So let's kind of talk a little bit about that.
I mean,
whoever wants to start.
Well, my role basically is I watch the student body, make sure that they're behaving and all that kind of good stuff. But I watch everybody.
Yeah.
It's kind of my job to make sure that we know what to do in case there's an emergency. It's kind of my job to make sure that we have everything in place in case something happens, inclement weather or something happens. We've got to have some plans in place. But, I don't do anything with the setup. I don't do anything with that kind of thing. But as far as just making sure that everyone is enjoying what they're doing. I mean, they're coming here to watch high school aged athletes do their best, and just watching to make sure that we can put the best on the floor, and making sure that we can behave in a way that represents Wawasee well to the community that comes in to watch, and other communities that come in to watch our school. Because, again, part of that whole part of being the number one school in the state of Indiana is what are we showing everyone else that we are. And if they can look in and see, wow, they're doing something different here, and we get a lot of compliments. I think over the years that I've been here is just how well our student bodies behaved. We get compliments of how many administrators that we have at the games. There's a lot of times that you'll see all of us here.
Oh yeah.
No matter what the sporting event is. So I think that speaks well of us, and I think that speaks well of us not only inside of our community but outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we're all there, we kind of experience. Mr. Perek's always kind of been our safety security guy, and so he's, if there's a situation that a custodian says, hey, maybe something with a door or whatever, like Mr. Perek's on it, he's going out, right? Mr. Snyder and I are staying in the gym. Mr. Snyder, I'll let him speak for himself, but oftentimes he's kind of there just keeping an eye on the kids, making sure that, especially if Mr. Perek's out, that he's on there. If we're all three there, my personality is the type that likes to get around and talk.
Oh, yeah.
And, I also find it important as the principal to make sure as much as I can to get around and see valued community members that often come to our events. We have lots of people who consistently show up to our athletic events, especially in addition to our musical performances and plays.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's enjoyable to get around the gym, talk to different people, say hi, thank them for coming out, and just kind of build that connection. I want them to experience who the principal is of the high school and get to know his personality. And I want them to know me, and taking that time at those games to talk to them, I think is beneficial for them and for me as well. So now, if one of these guys isn't here and it's just me, then the first priority is ensuring the safety of the entire building. So that's number one. The second thing then is our student section. Make sure that they are representing us the way that we expect them to represent us. So if they aren't here, that's the first priority. If they're both here, then I'm kind of doing that. We kind of call it the principal thing, but honestly, it's just my personality too. Whether I'm principal or not, that's just kind of my personality.
I'm the principal, and I'm not a bad guy. Like I'm actually nice, and that's how people want to see you guys. And
we care.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And that's what I would say. Mr. Doty, as athletic director, he's responsible for the setup and actual running of all the sporting events, and so he's really the guy in charge of the event. Our job as administrator, I see it as twofold. I've always seen it as twofold. One is, like these guys talked about, is sort of the crowd management, to make sure that our adults and students are representing Wawasee in the best possible way, and that we don't have any issues that way. So as administrators, ultimately, it's our responsibility if something goes sideways. And so we have to be aware. And again, it kind of goes back to culture creation.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Walmer has worked a lot with our cheer block. It's in a different place today than it was when we first got here, and some of the things they would say, and so that part's good. And then the other part that I think is really important and can't be undersold is that when we are seen in public supporting kids, we are investing in our community. The adults see that we care about the kids, that we're there to support them, cheer for them, just like they are. We cheer just like anybody else does. And so I think, as administrators, one of the things that it's important to a school culture is that everyone knows how much we care about the kids. And being seen in public, supporting students, like at sporting events, in theater, in music, whatever it is, our chance to support kids because we do care, not because we just want people to think we care.
Yeah.
It is an investment in our community, and I've always believed that that's one of the biggest payoffs that can happen is when we are visible at these public events.
I think it's an interesting note, though, too, to say that I don't ever remember in the 20 years of being an administrator here at the high school, especially the last 6 here with Mr. Walmer and Mr. Snyder, I don't ever remember anyone ever saying that I'm mandated to go to a sporting event. No one has ever said you have to attend. And I've never heard that. Mm-hmm. So, when people see us there, we want them to know that we're there because we're choosing to be there. We are taking time away from our personal life. It's not a normal job necessarily where you just go put in your 8 to 5 and you go home. This is a job where you put in we'll just say you're 8 to 3, and maybe you get to go home for a little bit. Maybe you get to see the kids. Maybe you get to see your wife, your significant other, and and you're back here by 6:30, 6:45, and you don't get home till 10 o'clock. So you just make some of those sacrifices, but at the same time, look at all the positive things that are coming out of that. You get to see people you don't normally see. They get to see you. The kids always know if we're there or not, and they know that we want to be there to see them. So and we get to see them in a different light.
Yeah.
It's not in the hallways. It's not in the lunchroom. This is something that they don't have to be there for. Neither do we. We're all choosing to do that, and I think that's a good thing for us to be able to do.
So you guys do sporting events and you work here at the school during the day. What are some things you do outside of school, like in your free time, outside of sporting events, stuff like that?
Do we have free time? Is that a thing?
We do podcasts.
There you go.
Well, I think July's coming.
July is coming. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm terrible. I don't have a lot of hobbies and things like that. Obviously I spend time with my family. I have an adult daughter. She has a husband, and I have 2 grandkids. So as much time as I can spend with them, I want to do that. I read. I typically have 2 or 3 books that I'm reading. One's usually like a leadership book, and one's usually a spiritual kind of book, and one's usually historical. So that's sort of how I occupy my time. And luckily, I'm married to a woman who really likes to watch sports, so we spend a lot of our time watching basketball and football and stuff like that. But I was kind of only half joking about we have free time. Of course, we have some free time, but like Mr. Perek said, our families over the years have had to make sacrifices so that we could do what we do and make whatever place. In this particular case, we're here at Wawasee. We're trying to make Wawasee the very best that we can be. And our families have had to be part of that process. And because of that, they've had to make some sacrifices in terms of how much time we've been able to spend with them. Sometimes and this doesn't happen very often, but there are sometimes like I'm spending more time with other people's kids than I am my own. And when that hits me, I have to fight through that because I know my purpose in life is to help students, help kids be the best versions of themselves. And that's why I'm here. And thankfully, I've had a family who's been supportive of that.
Yeah, and oh man, there's so much to say on that.
Yeah.
These guys, we're all in different stages of life, right? I'm at the stage where my oldest is a freshman in high school and my youngest is in kindergarten, and I got 4 kids, and so I love my job. What Mr. Snyder said in terms of my personal calling and my personal mission and working with kids, like that's where my heart's at. And so when I leave here, and I know most parents right now are going to totally understand what I'm saying. When you have kids at these ages, like my free time is them because I am doing whatever is needed for them to do the things they want to do. So it might be Saturday morning, I'm getting up early for the soccer game. It might be hanging around to watch, a track meet, for Caden now. Monday nights, I'm going to the gymnastics for my daughter for her to be in gymnastics. So for me, the free time is really spent investing in my own personal kids. And so I'll be honest, if and when I have those times where I'm going to do something for myself, there's a reality to just like totally disconnecting. Like if we had a beach nearby, I would just go plop on a beach, read a book, and just lay there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's. I love watching sports. I love the big games especially. But between work and just taking care of the kids, I don't really find as much time anymore to I do like getting out and golf. I'm terrible at golfing, or whatever, but I love getting out there and doing that during the summer, and just kind of hanging by the pool when I have that downtime.
Good. My kids are adults, and one's moved out, and one is on his way moving out. So as far as time goes, I like to hunt. I like to fish. I like to hike. So a lot of times when I go on vacation, it's doing something along those lines. But yeah, free time changes. You've kind of heard three three separate things here, and we've all. But Mr. Snyder's the one that's been through all of those stages at this point. I think I'm in the middle of stage 2 at the moment. But yeah, I mean, when Mr. Walmer's exactly right. When you have your kids, your free time is spent with them doing the things that they're choosing to do, whether that's sports or whatever the case might be with your families. But, and that's nothing that adults ever think about as far as, wow, I want me time, because our me time is our family time. So that's where we let down. As far as totally disconnecting, it's really, really, really difficult to disconnect in an administrative outside. The weekends are not disconnected. Long weekends, spring breaks not disconnected. We get very few chances to actually disconnect. We're always looking at email. Sunday we're looking at email. Wednesday is spring break. I guarantee we're all looking at emails. We're getting texts from teachers. We're getting something on Parent Square from a student. We're always connected at some point. Thank you, social media. But the opportunities to disconnect are fewer and fewer.
And that's difficult. And I guess, if somebody's listening to this podcast and if I could just offer any advice, it's we can all, it doesn't matter what job you have. This happens to be our particular vocation, but you can get swallowed up by any job. And that becomes what defines you. That becomes what takes up all of your time and thought process. And like Mr. Perek said, it's really difficult for all three of us to disconnect, because there's always somebody reaching out to us who needs a decision on something. I don't think I've ever gone on a vacation where I haven't had to deal with emails and back and forth. But having said that, and I've learned this as I've gotten older, because I wasn't always good at this, is work-life balance. You have to find time to prioritize your family and your own well-being in the midst of all this, because it's easy, again, for anybody to get swallowed up and just pour everything you have, and you don't have anything left for the people who are most important in the world to you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, I think, community members and students, I think they realize that, like, yeah, these teachers, I don't know. I heard a teacher once say, when I was a student, I thought teachers lived at the school because they were there before we were. And it wasn't true, but that's just, you gotta, and I think, like I said, students and parents and stuff, they understand that, yes, they're teachers, they have families, some of them coach, and so they have to have their time also, but yeah, they're still working.
And I think, this is an athletic podcast. You're focusing on Wawasee Athletics, and as much as we talk about work-life balance, I don't think many people realize how much time coaches put in. High school coaches, you talk about times changing. A long time ago, it was just kind of, you coached your season and then you had some time off, and it was much easier to have that balance. And when just about every sport is year round now, in terms of what the coach has to do to develop a program. And so, I give a lot of credits as an old coach. Like I said, we've all coached and we spent time like that. But our coaches here at Wawasee do a fantastic job. I can't speak highly enough of the group of people that we have leading our athletes here at Wawasee. They are high character. They're willing to push the kids, but in a way that they show they love them by pushing them, right? And so that's, I don't want to get too far away from where we were talking about time and all that stuff, but I do think it's really important that we acknowledge how much effort, not just during the season, but in the off season, our coaches are putting into they're pouring into the lives of young people.
And they have families too.
Correct.
And that's hard. Our basketball team, we lost in sectionals. And we went in the locker room, and Coach Garber went to the students and said, the players, I should say, and said, in the next 48 hours, the first person you should thank is your parents for letting you do this. Because it's not easy as a parent either to let your students play sports or your wife or your husband to coach. So yeah, so it's things like that
Yeah.
you got to take in.
Correct.
Because it's not easy. But.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, any words of advice or anything you'd give to people who might listen to this podcast or this episode alone? Not sure.
I would just say, that people are that are listening to this are obviously interested in Wawasee. They're probably interested in athletics. Just continue to support our kids. Come to games. Be a part of our athletic community. I think, high school sports can still be the center of any community. And the more adults that we have that are pouring into young people and supporting them in their efforts, in basketball, how hard it is and how long a season is. And if adults are there to pick you up when you're feeling down, and it might be somebody you don't even know. It's just somebody who has watched you play or whatever that is. And so I would just encourage more and more people to show up at games, yell like crazy, supporting our students, not at referees. and I think, there'll be benefits to them. It's not just for our kids. It's benefits to those people who show up and are part of that event.
So it's really I want to stress a point, and I might step on some toes some of our listeners, and I don't mean too personally if I do. So if you're feeling that I'm speaking to you directly, maybe I am, and I don't know it. But I'll tell you one thing that really irks me is when I hear fans, in whatever sport, and I hear comments like, "Oh, why would he do that? Oh, that was so stupid." Or, "Oh, why would he do that? That pass he wasn't there. Why would he do that?" It's just like comments that I hear that are demeaning towards one of the players on the court. And it's like, maybe because he had to make a quick decision. He's a teenager who hasn't had 20 years of experience playing the sport, and they made a choice that maybe wasn't the best choice. And so then there's consequences for that, whether the other team gets the ball or whatever it may be. But when I hear fans that are demeaning towards our own players in that way, I've comments like, "That's so why did he do that? That was so stupid." It blows my mind that we would be talking about a teenager like that who's out there giving his or her best. Like, they're not intending to make a mistake. And if that particular player is getting more playing time than your own kid, than your nephew, than your niece, your grandchild, whoever it may be, it still does absolutely no good to make any kind of comment like that maybe in hopes that a coach would hear it so the coach might make a change.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear that stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, and just, this season I've heard it, and we've had to address some. And so, for me, these kids are student athletes, but I'll also say any kid that's in any club here that's spending any amount of time, I'm speaking to. So take it for what it's worth. But I had a coach in college. He was an older guy. He was an assistant coach, way older than Mr. Snyder is right now. So he had to be he was probably like 130 then.
Yeah.
So I played baseball in college, and it was a day where we didn't have practice, but the day before we had a game. Umpire that was there at the game, he was that dude that always showed up to games, and he just did not care at all. And you could tell he had that demeanor.
Yeah.
And he made some horrible call, and I think it was actually against me. I forget what it was. But the next day, we're just buddies and I were out at the baseball field. We're just hitting ground balls and taking ground balls and just practicing on our own. And the assistant coach noticed, so he pulled over. He came over to the field, and he's just talking to me out there at the field. And he goes, "Jeff, what really gets me is you guys were out here busting your butt." Well, he used a different word. Busting your butt, for 2-3 hours a day, every day, just for that one game. You do this every single day for that one game. The least that umpire could do is get out here and give his best. You guys are doing this every day, 2-3 hours, and, you deserve to have someone that comes out here and cares. And I feel like our student athletes deserve the same. When fans come out to watch, they deserve what Mr. Snyder said, supporting them, being positive. That's what they deserve. They don't deserve critiquing from the stands. They don't deserve hearing those kinds of negative comments. These kids have busted their butts for 2-3 hours every day for this one game. The least we can do is be out there to cheer them on and let them know that we see you, we love you, and we thank you for what you do to represent our school. I'm done. I'm out.
That's a mic drop. That was really good.
Well, it's true though. I mean, it's stuff we see all the time, and even not in sports. People just open their mouth, and it just like keep it shut.
Can we just say that? Be really good, freeing.
Garrett, Mr. Snyder is retiring at the end of the year. Yeah, if Mrs. Plick, you didn't just get hired, I'm gonna be sneaking you in here, and you can.
Really.
Yeah. I mean, there's no athlete. It doesn't matter if it's high school. It doesn't matter if it's college, pros, whatever you want to do. Especially when you're talking about the really little kids, middle school and elementary. There's not one student athlete who goes on that floor, number one, thinking they're going to make a mistake. There's not one that goes out there saying, well, we'll see how it goes today. Everybody that goes out there does their best for that day. And it's different days. I mean, you just watching basketball right now with March Madness. There's good games and there's bad games for even those guys. And they've been practicing a whole lot longer than a lot of the guys in high school.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we learn our lessons from people that we don't expect to. I know we talk about our cheer block and the changes that they've made over the last number of years, 6 years. And I think there'll be a lot of positive that you hear from our cheer block. Every once in a while we have a small issue, we deal with it and it's fine. But I would say the overwhelming time is they're pretty positive. They're pretty encouraging. And I think that's something that people could learn from.
Yeah. There's always changes to be made, and that's what's special about this. As we do it, and then we learn from it, and then we change it, and then how can we get better? And I think we've talked about that today really hard and good. That you guys want to try to be the best that you can be, and you want to have your teachers ready to be the best that they can be, and then that's all good stuff. So, thank you guys for coming on.
Yeah, Garrett,
I appreciate it.
Thanks for the invitation.
You did really
Thank
good,
you.
Garrett.
Thank
You
you.
did yourself really well.
This is really good.
There's no way ever that I could have sat in front of 3 of my high school administrators, whether from a different school or not, and handled myself with the poise that you did today. Yeah. So good job, bud.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's always learning to be done, and you're retiring at the end of the year.
I am. Yeah, I am. It's been a long run. It's been a good run, but everything has a season.
Yeah.
So moving on.
Yeah. So thank you guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett.